But before we move forward, I guess I should just mention this. The other big story that broke earlier in the week, it was like right after I did the podcast last week, and that is that Nikki Bella and John Cena are no longer an item. They are not getting married. They were supposed to get married in the next few weeks. In fact, there was a wedding planned down in Mexico on Cinco de Mayo, and that will no longer be happening. And, there's a lot of conflicting reports about who called off the wedding, and literally just people will say one thing, and then, these other things like Us Weekly or TMZ will say something else, and I've lost track and don't care enough to go back and track exactly who said what. But there are reports that it was her decision, that she could just tell that John wasn't into this, and she had enough, and she called it off. And then there are other reports that suggest that it was Cena's decision. He got cold feet at the last second, and that Nikki is just absolutely devastated. I can believe either way. I mean, Cena's been posting some pretty cryptic stuff on his Twitter, which he doesn't always do, so that makes me think, well, maybe she did break it off. Maybe he is upset about this. They have that Total Bellas show, or is it Total Bellas or Total Divas? There's one of those shows is about to premiere in a few weeks, I think, May 20th, I think. One of those shows is coming back, and apparently the season-long storyline is going to be built all around this wedding, and it's supposed to end. The season was supposed to end with the wedding, so I'm not sure how they're going to handle that now. This whole thing, to me, it's not really all that much of a surprise, right? I mean, Cena doesn't want kids. Nikki clearly wants to have kids. And it always seemed to me like John Cena had to be convinced to put a ring on this woman's finger. And then finally he did it. Vince McMahon came up with this great idea to turn it into an angle. And I don't believe the whole thing was an angle. I think they just took something real and they decided to, turn it into a storyline. For example, I'm convinced that he popped the question to her and officially got engaged to her weeks and weeks before WrestleMania last year. I have nothing to base that on other than my own gut intuition. I don't think the actual engagement came at WrestleMania. I don't think she was surprised. I mean, she's not a stupid person. She could see it coming from a mile away. And I'm sure she was being asked about it multiple times in the build-up to that show. So I don't buy for a second that she was caught by surprise and the actual engagement came at WrestleMania in the ring. That's complete bullshit. I don't buy that. But I think they had this idea, and it made for a great moment, although looking back on it now, it's not so great. But it just feels like this dude had to be dragged kicking and screaming every step of the way into this. And maybe that was all just a put on for the cameras, and that's not how John Cena really is. I don't believe that. I think he is that way. I mean, he just doesn't seem like the kind of guy, based on things he said in interviews and such, that he is somebody who is ready to settle down and have a family. He's getting more and more opportunities in Hollywood. If you don't want to get married and you don't want to have kids, then guess what? Don't get married and don't have kids. The guy's already been divorced once. Better to call it off now than to get married and regret doing that later on. Because that's not fair to anybody. That's not fair to him and his bank account. That's not fair to her. I mean, the poor woman's not getting any younger. If she wants to have kids, then you know what? You got to move on and let her find somebody else and go have 15 kids. This does render not one but two big WrestleMania segments from last year's show completely meaningless. The Cena Nikki proposal, which is not going to make any WrestleMania highlight packages now. And Undertaker leaving his gear in the middle of the ring after his match with Roman Reigns and then vanishing into the night. Nice moments that now you go back and watch them and just think, what a gigantic waste of time that was. And as far as, Nikki's role in the company, I see people joking, well, that's the end of the Bella push in WWE. And I mean, these people are obviously talking out of their assholes. I mean, the Bellas are big stars in WWE. They build... they have a lot of equity in this company. They build the Total Divas and the Total Bella franchises around them. So, Cena or no Cena, the Bellas are not going anywhere. In fact, Nikki was on Twitter teasing, because WWE.com put an article up saying we would like to see, women's tag team titles coming to SmackDown Live soon. And there's been so many seeds planted that it's just a matter of time before we get those women's tag team belts, at least on one of the brands. And so Nikki must have seen the article, and she was kind of, there was this little kayfabe back and forth on Twitter with the Bellas and Peyton Royce and Billie Kay. They were teasing that could be a match at some point, possibly for women's tag team titles. So the Bellas aren't going anywhere, whether you like them or not. And that's really all I have to say about the whole Cena Nikki thing. Let them both move on. Let them both be happy. If Cena wants to, have the bachelor life as he breaks into Hollywood, hell, go for it, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. But who broke it off and this and that. Both camps have their stories. Both camps leak news that makes them look better. That's how this works. That's why you see conflicting stories out there. I mean, it happens all the time with celebrity divorces and stuff. And it's funny because, at work, we've been brought in on occasion to sort of assist one side or the other when it comes to some of these like celebrity breakups and celebrity divorces. And it's just comical. You have members from one camp leaking this to this publication, and then the other person is leaking this news to that publication. And they're sort of sparring in the media, not directly, but they're doing it through intermediaries, right? So that's kind of what's going on here, although I don't get the sense that there's, a lot of bad blood here. I think that they'll, maybe they'll still be friends. Who knows?